Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel for yet another school project. It's good to see you. Today, I just thought it would be fun to go back and look at TikTok and like all of the things that have happened since the American government has been debating whether it will exist or not at the end of the year. So as I was going through, I was looking at all of the fun trends that they would do. Trends were very popular on the app, still are very popular on the app because they're very easily replicable and a lot of the users can participate in these kinds of trends. Everyone who was on TikTok back in the day when it was still like embarrassing to have remembers all of the dancing trends.
Wait.
One of my personal favorites was the ghost camera trend where they would like cut out eyes in a sheet and then take pictures like all aesthetically. I thought that one was really cute.
Tears falling down at the party.
So you could see like these trends are pretty harmless. They're pretty PG or like have PG versions of them. And so they're very popular because of those things. But the trends that I'm going to be looking at today are not as wholesome. Time to check up on my number one man. Hey, are you winning? So
Is this taboo? Baby, we built this house.
like I mentioned before, this is a school project. It seems like all I use this YouTube channel for are school projects, but nonetheless, when I presented my idea, like my rough draft to my class, it seemed that some people, aka my professor, did not know what a thirst trap is. So let me break it down real quick. So this right here, this is like a cute, wholesome picture. Everybody's smiling, fully clothed. Looks like they're doing a pretty normal activity. This is a thirst trap. Okay? He's got his shirt off. He's, showing off his abs in a gym, I think. And then he's pouring water on himself to like emulate, I don't know, sweat and heat, if that's hot to some people. But you could see that there's a pretty big difference, right? The formal definition of a thirst trap is a photograph, such as a selfie or video shared for the purposes of attracting attention or desire. So you might be thinking to yourself, why am I subjecting you to an academic video of pure cringe? Well, this semester I took a class at Texas State called Creative Spark, where we analyzed a whole bunch of authors to try to come up with some sort of cohesive definition as to what creativity is. And then with that definition, analyze a whole bunch of different artists in different mediums. So like painters, cooks, architects, stuff like that, and see if they fit like any sort of definition of creativity that we came up with. The definition that I liked most out of this class is the tendency to generate or recognize ideas, alternatives, or possibilities that may be useful in solving problems, communicating with others, and entertaining ourselves and others. So we also learned in this class that there are 4 different types of creativity. There's anthropological, psychological, historical, and metaphysical. I'm not going to get into the last 3, but TikTok videos fit into anthropological creativity since it's on a cultural level. And in order to recreate these videos, you have to like learn how to do it. You don't just like innately know how to make a TikTok video, You could also argue that it's psychological due to the amount of psychological damage this video has caused me. So these TikTok videos, they do take some sort of effort to create them. You at least have to have a surface level knowledge of like how an algorithm works, how to edit a video, how to get correct sensual lighting, and like other stuff to do with that. Are they as hard to do as, say, like create a Picasso? No, not by any sort of means at all. But I mean, you have to give them credit. Some of them do look really cool when they come out. So like this video, for example.
Don't ask me about my ex, let's just pretend that nigga died. Ain't no pressure about no nigga, tell his ass to fall in line.
Takes a lot less effort than this video.
People wanna walk around me trying to steal my talk about when you say you're doing this thing, though.
The second video has a lot of cuts, and you have to like line your hands up perfectly to where it will like fit within the same camera frame, and you have to look really hot while doing it. So I guess you could say that they're creative on some sort of a scale, just not as creative as other works. But there's also been a notion that we discovered that creativity goes down as replicability goes up. So the more easily replicable something is, the less creative it is. And I 100% agree with that notion. I actually crochet. I love to create granny squares because it is the only thing that I know how to do. And I've watched a YouTube tutorial over and over again to show me how to do it. And then it's just become second nature to me at this point on how to create a granny square. At that point, it's just not creative. It's kind of just like I'm regurgitating a product because I know how to make it. So I know it might be confusing. I've argued that they could be creative, but they could also not be creative. But as I was making the granny square point, I thought it would be really cool to look into our biological urges and impulses creative. So my professor actually suggested this topic for me, and I decided that it would be a really good point to like drive my main argument in this video. I am a biology major at Texas State, so it really piqued my interest looking into something like this. There isn't a lot of research on TikTok thirst traps themselves, but there is a lot of research on short form content and pornographic content. So I'm kind of just going to merge the two to create like a mega hypothesis for this video. So whether you have an extensive background in the sciences or not, you've probably heard the word dopamine before. Dopamine is a type of neurotransmitter that sends chemical messages all throughout your body via nerve cells. So dopamine can be a good thing in the right dosage. It aids in functioning things like your learning, your motivation, sleep, attention, movement, etc. But your body can malfunction in a way, and dopamine can be a bad thing as well. When you're constantly using something, your brain kind of picks up on reward cues. So, for example, when you receive things like a text message, your brain releases a certain amount of dopamine, and it kind of sends a rewarding signal like, oh, I just did this thing, and I received something as a reward. And so your brain sends a dopamine spike. So your brain sends that dopamine spike as a way to be like, okay, that was a good thing that just happened, and we really liked that that happened, so we want more of that. So the way that dopamine works in your brain, it's kind of like a roller coaster. So let's say that you receive a text message, a good text message, for example. Your brain sends a spike of dopamine, and after a while, it kind of wears off. That feeling kind of wears off. So how do you get more of that dopamine back? Well, you start a conversation with that person, and you keep receiving text messages so that your dopamine keeps spiking up during that conversation. So this is actually why your phone can be very addicting, especially with short form content apps like TikTok, because you're constantly seeing videos that make you feel some type of way. And it gives you those hits of dopamine in the process. So now that we're on the same page that TikTok is basically just like a dopamine mill, and that's why it's so addictive, we need to look deeper into sexually explicit content. So thirst traps fall under the sexually explicit content umbrella. It's sexually explicit content is defined as content in which human sexual activity, human sexual practice, or human sexual behavior is displayed in a manner in which humans experience and express their sexuality. I think we're all adults here, so I'm not going to go into too much detail explaining what sexually explicit content is, but the closest thing that I could find research on is brain chemistry and the effects it has on porn. So just like I discussed earlier, the same way that your brain looks for kind of like validation when it's low in dopamine, your brain tells you to text your friends. when it's low in dopamine. It does the same thing when you're craving sexual encounters. So when you engage in sexually explicit events, like sexually explicit content like porn, your brain releases dopamine to signal that what you're experiencing is pleasurable. It's actually a biological impulse that your brain releases dopamine during acts like this because your biological impulses want you to reproduce to keep your species populated. Your brain also releases other hormones like oxytocin and adrenaline to help with alertness and focus. And sexual release also brings your serotonin levels down to the point where you feel relaxed and calm. So just like dopamine is released when you're seeing content that you find enjoyable regularly, or when you're engaging in a sexual encounter, dopamine is released when you're also watching a thirst trap. If you're watching this video and you were in my class, think back to when I played Sin City before my presentation. Most of us who are on the app said that the song made us cringe, or maybe like some of us giggled when we heard it, while others said that it made them feel like hot, you know? Dopamine is released in both of those encounters. If we find content to be cringy or embarrassing to look at, our brain still sends signals of dopamine to let you know that we find the content to be embarrassing, but in a funny or ironic way. Now that we understand that we're essentially biologically wired to be intrigued by thirst traps, what makes people not only want but like to make them? There are a few things that I think drive people to create this type of content. Number one, we have all heard that our brains are not fully developed until the age of 25. So with that being said, being exposed to highly addictive activities at such a young age can be damaging in lots of ways, but especially to our dopamine receptors. We are seeing kids younger and younger not only having access to technology, but also access to the internet. So this means that they're exposed to content that was never meant for their particular age group. We see this particularly in young girls where they look way older than they actually should be. So for an example, here's a reference photo. This is me at 13, and this is Lauren Gray at 13. We're the same age. Yeah. So we can sort of conclude that this is partly because of the exposure that these kids had to age inappropriate content. They see that the big kids are wearing makeup and they stick out their tongues and get lots of likes and views from it. So they kind of do the same thing in hopes to get the same kind of treatment, at least from their peers. Number two, making sexually explicit content kind of has the same effect that receiving a text message does. You post a video and you get likes and views from your peers and or strangers on the internet, and it gives you a validation that's different from any kind of validation that you've had in real life, if you've even gotten some. So through the use of video editing, makeup, lighting, and a newfound confidence, you can basically change your persona from a shy, ugly person to a confident, hot mama. And then there's also number three, which is the content creator just needs money and are just trying to play what's hot in the algorithm at that point, and they're just using it as a cash grab. So after all of this information, do I think that TikTok thirst traps and in turn biological urges and impulses are creative? No. Aww. Not only does content like this not provide any sort of solution to a problem, content like this doesn't think outside of a box. Part of the definition that I provided was to generate or recognize ideas, and it does not do that. There isn't a need for sexually explicit content in order to communicate with your fellow human. There's no need for humans to create thirst traps in order to get laid, to feel sexy, or to even feel good about themselves. They provide nothing but entertainment to a platform where there are millions of other ways to get likes and views, so there is no sort of creativity in them at all. So in doing this particular project, it actually helped me make sense of the gifted and talented testing that myself and so many others were subjected to in their early education. We had to fill out these boxes for part of the test where they had different shapes in them, and were instructed to draw anything that we felt inspired with the shapes. And it showed who thunk outside of the box and who didn't. So when we did this activity in our Creative Spark class, lots of people drew pizza or like a beak of a bird for the open triangle, which if everyone thinks the same thing, because we have been hardwired to think that way, then was the product really creative? And I don't think so. The test is looking for kids who think not only outside of their biological impulses, but things that they have been hardwired to think. So that's exactly what we're looking for when we're judging other mediums of art or content, etc. So we're judging who has the creative spark to be forward thinking. So that's it for my video today and my project as a whole. I liked that I did a video project as my final project. That was probably controversial because none of you can argue with me like you did in class this entire semester. I hope you enjoyed, and thanks.